Hello and welcome to the channel. It's Alfred Farius and the Sandman here to talk you through the ultimate gotcha to the Xenos, which is of course Deathwatch. The aim of this video is to make sure that you don't have to read the entire Deathwatch supplement in order to beat them. So we don't just cover the gotchas, but also the key plays and top combos that you're likely to see. The faction abilities are on the screen right now. I don't think we need to talk through those, but Alfred, do you want to talk us through the thing that Deathwatch are famous for, which is of course special issue ammunition?
So special issue ammo. So this is something really unique to the Deathwatch and it gives them a lot of flavour. What it means is a lot of their bolt weapons can choose the profile that they're going to shoot with, and a lot of these profiles are really good in different situations. You've got Dragonfire bolts, so what this means is that when they're shooting, the attacks can ignore the benefits of cover, and the great thing about this is that that means that they're ignoring not only the +1 to the cover save, but also ignore the minus for shooting through dense cover. Then you've got Hellfire rounds. Hellfire rounds mean that when they're making attacks versus something that isn't a vehicle or Titanic, they can +1 to the wound roll. Now this is great against big things like Greater Demons, or Tau battle suits, because those things aren't vehicle or Titanic. Next up, they've got Kraken bolts. With Kraken bolts, they're giving an additional 6 inches to their range and improving their AP by 1. And this stacks with any AP bonus from the combat doctrines. So if you think that you're just out of range of a Deathwatch unit, they can switch to firing Kraken bolts and suddenly they're in range again. So watch out for that. And finally, they can switch to Vengeance rounds. Now, Vengeance rounds are quite simple. It's +1 to the damage. So against other Marines with 2 wounds, this is really great because suddenly they're doubling their effectiveness and killing your units much quicker.
And it's worth noting that, as Alfred says, not all units get access to the special issue ammunitions, but there is a stratagem for 2 CP, which means that any infantry unit with bolt weapons can get access to the special issue ammunition. You can also give special issue ammunition to sergeants, and this actually can have some quite interesting effects. So for example, on like a Centurion Devastator sergeant, this can mean that with all those shots counting as special issue ammunition, they can actually kill 10 generic toughness 4, 2 and 3 up armor save marines on their own, or even a full blob of 20 Necron warriors. So you can actually get some really great utility out of special issue ammunition. It's just quite limited in 9th edition.
The other interesting thing about Deathwatch is that they have access to kill teams. And kill teams is when they can mix models that would usually be in different units into one unit to get the benefits of multiple things at once. So first of all, you've got your Proteus kill team. Proteus kill teams consist mainly of your firstborn Marines. So they can mix and match Terminators, Veterans, Bikers, Vanguard Veterans, Jump Packs. So you'll get a really mixed unit, and when you're mixing these units, you have to take the toughness of the majority of the unit. So you might find a Deathwatch player gets just 1 more bike than the others, so that the whole squad becomes toughness 5, something to look out for. And in addition, they can still combat squad, so they can split up this unit so that it's 1 unit of full Terminators, and that Terminator squad will still be OBSEC, or 1 unit of full Bikers, which will also still be OBSEC. So these are some things to look out for. And while we're talking about combat squadding, let's talk about the Fortis kill team. This is the one that's primarily made of Primaris Marines. And what they can do here is they can make a squad of Outriders, which is all OBSEC by combat squadding. And this is something to really look out for because those Outriders are really nippy. They can get up onto objectives, they can shoot a lot of shots and fight a lot in combat, so be wary of that. The great thing about combat squadding with this Fortis kill team is that you'll have a 5-man Outrider squad at which other Marines don't have access to. And not only that, but they have a 1 CP stratagem to fall back and still charge later on, so you can't lock them down.
Yeah, they can be really aggressive with those. And the Indomitor is the Gravis variant of the kill teams. The reason this is interesting is because of the fact that you have to take 5 of the basic model, which in this case is the Heavy Intercessors. These can actually act like ablative wounds for the rest of your squads. So I think the classic one you're going to see here is 5 Heavy Intercessors with 4 Eradicators and an Inceptor. So this is Eradicators, which we all know are amazing, and they've got 15 ablative wounds with Gravis, which can have the 3 up armor save or the 2 up with the Space Marine strat. They can ignore -1 AP with a Warlord trait that they get access to. They can have the 5 up invuln. So they've got these Eradicators which are always really good, but now they're just that little bit harder to chew through. And they've got the Inceptor in the squad, which gives them access to a 1 CP strat, which allows them to fall back and still shoot, so you also can't even tag the Eradicators, which is one of their main weaknesses. I also love this kill team because it gives you access to OBSEC aggressors, for example, also, which can be really good at holding that mid board as they're good at shooting and in combat. This is actually a pretty flexible kill team. And finally, we have the Spectra's kill team. This is basically the Phobos kill team. It does mean you can take a unit of 5 eliminators if that's what you fancy to hold your backfield objective, and actually it means you can take the Infiltrator Helix, and this means that they could ignore the first damage going through to them.
So let's talk about some of the stratagems that are unique to the Deathwatch now. So one to be aware of is Atonement through Honor, and if a Deathwatch squad has a black shield within it, that squad can pay 1 CP to heroically intervene. So watch out for that one. Then you've got Shroud Field, and that means that for 2 CP, they can make a Corvus Blackstar only be targeted by ranged attacks if it's the closest target. So don't position all your heavy weapons there in order to try and kill that turn 1, because they will just pay 2 CP and make it untargetable. The other really interesting stratagem they have is Brotherhood of Veterans. The Deathwatch, of course, made up from veterans from all different chapters across the Imperium, and this is a really tasty little stratagem for that. So in the command phase, they'll select a Deathwatch unit, and they can give them a chapter tactic or a successor chapter tactic from the main Space Marines book. A few ones to look out for: you've got the White Scars that will let them advance and charge, you've got the Ultramarines that lets them fall back and shoot, you've got the Imperial Fists, which means that they can ignore cover, and 6s on bolt weapons will explode, which means that it'll cause 2 hits, and that stacks with the special issue ammunition that they have, so you can get some really interesting little combos there. Also, Iron Hands would mean that they can count their vehicles as being double the number of wounds, which might give them that extra bit of ballistic skill to shoot you off something. The final strat that we like is Clavis. This stratagem is in the fight phase when a vehicle is within 1 inch of a Watchmaster. So that means that unit will suffer D3 mortal wounds, and until the end of the phase, that unit won't be able to fight until all other Deathwatch units have done so.
And of course they have a bunch of amazing stratagems against Xenos factions, but we'll go through those at the end. But in the meantime, let's just talk about Warlord Traits. So they've got these big blobs of OBSEC units, which are really strong, but they can also give OBSEC to any core unit, which is going to be always useful. They have Optimized Priority, which means that Deathwatch units can still shoot and perform actions. So again, you can have this kind of Indomitor kill team that has all of this firepower in the middle of the board, or a Terminator OBSEC unit, and they're still shooting whilst performing actions. And they also have access to Paragon of the Chapter, which, similar to Brotherhood of Veterans, means that they can get access to a Warlord trait from the main book. So this means they can get access to the Imperial Fist Warlord trait, as I mentioned, which allows units nearby to ignore -1 AP. They can also fight first if they count as the Blood Angels Warlord trait. There's some really interesting ones. Raven Guard can allow them to redeploy, so definitely check for sure what your opponent is capable of doing.
On to Relics. There are a few that are interesting. The Dominus Aegis, which is a 6-inch bubble of 5+ invulnerable for core and characters, which can be really strong on the big unit of Gravis. The Tome of the Ectoclades, which has always been a strong relic. In 9th edition, this lets you reroll wounds versus a single datasheet for core units. So if you go against an opponent that's really stacking one datasheet many times, getting reroll wounds versus that can be really strong. Or even if you're against a Titanic unit, you can choose that, and then getting reroll wounds versus that datasheet really pumps up the efficiency of your army. And finally, you've got the Vorkan pattern Auspicator. That's a hard word to say. But it gives a 6-inch aura of +1 to hit versus units with fly. That could be really good in a meta where there are a lot of things with the fly keyword. So for example, the Drukhari Codex has a lot of transports with fly. In fact, any Eldar have a lot of fly, so something to watch out for.
Yeah, they're all really strong, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Beacon Angelus, because you can put this on a Chapter 9 bike, for example, and then you can throw them up the board turn 1, and this will effectively allow for a sort of redeploy for a Deathwatch infantry or biker unit, and can get some really nasty stuff into your face turn 1. In terms of characters, it's worth being aware of Artemis because he has a grenade that can do D6 mortal wounds, but also the psychic powers for Deathwatch are also pretty tasty. So they have a Premorphic Resonance where you select a unit and it gets 3 effects. It can Overwatch on a 5-up, it counts as fighting first, and it gets +1 to hit in melee. And then they have Fortified with Contempt, which can make your chunkier Gravis units, for example, even chunkier with a 5-up Feel No Pain. Nora Void can be interesting potentially. This is -1 to the attacks characteristic of a unit. It also means that if that unit is trying to charge, it can only target the closest unit, so you can potentially control where your opponent is going to put their damage. Next we've got Mantle of Shadow. Now with stratagems, Deathwatch can stop their Corvuses being shot, turn 1. They can also make sure that they can deep strike pretty much any unit with CP, and if they use Mantle of Shadow, they can also stop another unit from being targeted. And this can mean that turn 1, for example, you've got very little to actually shoot. And finally, they've got Severance, which can do a mortal wound and also turn off all the character's aura abilities, which for some armies could be quite crippling.
And then because the Deathwatch are the primary Xenos hunters of the Imperium, they have a lot of stratagems specifically against different Xenos factions. So the first one is a bit more generic, Death to the Alien. It's one command point, and it gives them an extra attack in close combat versus Xenos units. Then, versus Eldari, which includes Harlequins, Drukhari, and Craftworlds, they can pay 1 CP to ignore any hit or ballistic skill modifiers. And then finally, versus your Tyranids, they've got Synaptic Severance. Versus a Synapse creature, for 1 CP, unmodified 6s to hit will auto-wound.
And whilst those 3 stratagems are pretty good against Xenos, the next 3 are going to be absolutely devastating. So Stem the Green Tide means that a Deathwatch unit can Overwatch against an Orc unit, and if any Orcs are killed as a result of that Overwatch, that Orc unit gets -2 to charge. So if you have some deep striking commandos, for example, and they try and make that 9-inch charge, it's actually going to be an 11. And then Overkill means that Necrons have -1 on their reanimation protocols. Targeting Stranders can be used after a Tower unit has fired a Markalite at a Deathwatch unit, and all Markalites are removed from that Deathwatch unit. And that takes us to the end of this video. I hope you found that useful. Please do check out the Space Marine video if you haven't already for more context on this faction. Please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next video where we're going to go over the Dark Angels.